We are recording. Hey everyone, welcome. Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are and when you see this. Thank you for attending this Production Count webinar. I'm your host, Nisarg Desai, and I'm the Director of Product Management at Huntress Labs, which is a security company. I'm also the head of the Boston chapter for Products That Count. For folks that are coming for the first time, welcome. We do these every month on a different product management topic. For those that have seen these in the past, welcome back. I'm not in Boston today. I'm in sunny New Orleans, Louisiana, where I'm for a product offsite. So I have a different setup for audio and video, but hopefully it still comes through okay. So today we'll do something a little different. If it's your first time, great. Just drop in. If you've been here before, today we'll be having a different format. We do have a webinar. We do have a very short single slide presentation, but we're going to be doing a format where it's more of an intimate fireside chat, where I talk to our guest and ask them questions about their journey. And the topic for today, cracking the code as a PM in different industries, different roles, different organizations, and different times in your PM journey. And this is one that I'm very excited about because I've been a PM for over 10 years now, and every single PM role is different. Every single situation is different. The ambiguity and the skills and the things that I've had to deal with, and I'm sure many of you have, are very, very, very different. And I just want to reflect back on, what are the things, the skills that I've needed to learn, that I have learned over this past decade or so, that have helped, me and my peers get here, and how we can help the rest of you folks learn from that, and just try and shorten the time it takes for you to get off the ground. So I'm really excited today. I'll let Patrick go in a second, who is a VP of Product MEDFAR. I'll let him intro himself in just a minute. You're someone who's really seen both the breadth and the depth of different roles in tech, not just PM, but different PM adjacent roles in engineering, in different domains, in different industries, in different sizes and types of organizations. So I felt it would be really cool to really understand, for the first 5 or 10 minutes, what Patrick's journey has been, from where he was, where he started, where he got, and what learnings he's had. And then the rest of the time, let's say 30 minutes or so, we'll be focused on me asking a whole bunch of questions that I have for Patrick that I want to learn from. At any point of time, if any of y'all have any questions, please use the Q&A function in the Zoom webinar. Send a question in through Q&A. I will find the right point to ask Patrick live, so we can get that resolved. But please make it interactive. This is kind of a, audience fireside chat, so we want to make sure that there's plenty of questions from all of y'all. If you're seeing this at some point in the future and not live, well, first of all, thank you for attending. You obviously cannot ask questions, but I'm sure that both Patrick and myself will be happy to connect with you on LinkedIn to talk about anything around product management. So with that said, without much further ado, let me turn it over to Patrick to first introduce himself, and then take it from there, share a screen and walk us through the first part of the webinar, which is your life journey. So over to you, Patrick.
Thanks, Nisarg, and hi everyone. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure sharing some of my experiences over the years. Patrick, I've been in product management for a while. I'm currently vice president of product management at MEDFAR. I think you're going to hear through my journey I always had a passion for building products, and that's been pretty much my journey so far. And today, reason, I was excited as well to join the webinar. I think over the years, I've come to learn, as many of you, I'm sure, that product management is a hard job, challenges through and through. And quite frankly, sometimes you learn lessons the hard way. And there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of upside, there's a lot of pain as well that comes with some of those challenges. And so, trying to share how the lessons I've learned over the years and try to avoid some of that pain for others is really something that's interesting and fun. to do. So that's why we're here today.
That's awesome. Patrick, tell me a little bit more about MEDFAR and where you are located, and a little bit more details about your current role.
Awesome. So yes, of course. So MEDFAR is an EMR or EHR company based out of Montreal. We have been in the market for a while. Our founders started the company in 2010. We have a very strong presence in Quebec, so more than half of the primary care clinics use our software here in Quebec. We also have presence in British Columbia, in New Brunswick, in Ontario, and we have other EHRs or EMRs in the States. And so a very deep presence, and we're really growing at a very fast clip. And part of what makes my role interesting at MEDFAR, and we'll talk about that as we go through the journey, but is that we have very different situations in different markets. So very, very strong in Quebec, other markets where we're growing, and that makes for a really interesting set of challenges from a product standpoint. And so my role is obviously prioritizing, strategizing the roadmap, and making sure that we are coherent across our different markets, and that our strategy allows us to continue to grow long term.
That is pretty cool. So, we have you in healthcare, I'm in cyber. It's going to be two different perspectives and experiences. So I'm super excited. Why don't you go ahead, share your screen, Patrick, and walk us through your single slide. We promised everyone there's no long PowerPoints here.
No.
Your life's journey, and how you got from where you were to where you are. And then once that's done, we move into a whole bunch of questions that I have for you, plus whatever the audience comes up with.
For sure. So a single slide, a couple of steps. So first of all, my background, I didn't mention so far, but I started in software engineering very young. I like to build stuff. When I was growing up, computers were making their way into the homes. So like a lot of people, I got keenly interested. And my journey started in software development, actually. So I graduated in software engineering. And my very first job was at Lockheed Martin Canada, to be specific. Very large defense organization, a great learning environment for building software, the importance of processes, of structure, of rigor, quality assurance, everything was there. And it wasn't until a little bit later that I actually stumbled into product management, pretty much by accident, to be honest. In defense, you typically get a contract from the government, you build the software, you deliver it, you give away the IP, and then you move on. I ended up being the team lead, moving through the ranks of software development, being a team lead on the only product where we retained the IP. So part of my job was going on Navy bases, installing updates, and obviously capturing feedback, bringing it back. So just by kind of doing the right thing, was just trying to improve our software, talking to sales, talking to marketing, I started doing product management before it was kind of a thing, really. And then my interest grew a lot in terms of thinking of the what and the why we were doing these things. Obviously, developing was fun, but I gravitated towards that aspect of the role, and realized that I would not be doing product management at Lockheed Martin, because that was this unicorn, this unique situation that allowed me to iterate into product management, but it wasn't meant to be in other environments. So. And that's where my product management journey really began. I had met my wife at the time. We wanted to stay in the Montreal area, grew our family here. And so wanting to do product management, I couldn't necessarily stay in the same industry. And so that's how my journey across different industries really started. First opportunity in retail, very small startup, doing active RFID. So really interesting technology. Think inventory management, anti-theft systems, those kind of things. And really the first, I'm going to say, growing experiences or failure in terms of some of the experiences that I have had. Many of you know by now, I think there's a lot more education on how to get involved with startups. At the time, I did two big mistakes. First of all, I did not meet the founder. So as a lot of you know, I'm sure culture comes from the founder. And so even though I met the number two in rank, there were some differences. So that was one thing. I didn't pay too much attention to the investment structure either of the company, and so ended up we ended up having to close the company, and there I was, looking for opportunities again in product management, and then joined another company in cybersecurity called Radio Point. And did a lot of my growing as a product manager at Radio Point, from product manager to senior to director. A lot of realization of what's important as a product manager came through my journey there. And I think when we go through some of the Q&A, we'll have a chance to go through some of that. But mainly one thing, for example, the fact that innovation doesn't always come from technology. So for me, with my background, software development at Lockheed Martin, I was very much focused around technology. And at Radio Point, our strategy was a fast follower strategy. And our innovation came from the business model that we had in market. And so, a lot of realizations, a lot of growth in that space. And then one thing led to another. Another realization is sometimes markets go away and there's nothing you can do about it. So some of we got caught in a crossfire of some of the bigger players taking shots at each other, and our market got literally taken away from us. And so at some point, company got in a little bit of trouble. We launched new products. Some of them were really successful, but in the end, I started looking for other opportunities after 7 or 8 years at that place. And I don't think I mentioned it, but my wife was a physiotherapist at the hospital in the South Shore of Montreal. And so I was hearing a lot of different horror stories around healthcare, tech, and so on. And that's where I gravitated towards health tech. I didn't have many options to choose from in the Montreal area, but there was this one big company that I thought was really interesting, TELUS Health at the time. And fortunately, I had some common contacts with people at TELUS Health, and managed to get a position there, even though I did not have much background in health, to be honest, right? So going from industry to industry, some of those transitions are more difficult than others. And for example, in cybersecurity, I really invested myself a lot in doing a CISSP certification, security certifications. In healthcare, I was hired based on the fact that I had product management experience. I knew the process around it, and the hiring manager was convinced that I could leverage the knowledge of the people around me to really make a difference in terms of the specifics of community pharmacy, but bring structure and rigor to the product management practice and manage up very well. And that's what was missing in this environment, was someone capable of managing up. And I did just that. Not everyone was convinced at first. I remember one VP telling me, "I'm not sure how you're going to pull this off, joining an organization such as ours with no background in pharmacy." Fortunately for me, there was a lot of people willing to share, and I invested myself, obviously, in spending a lot of time with customers. I also spent time in the insurance solutions division at TELUS. 2 years there. A little bit of a different twist on healthcare for sure. And that too is a story of just diving in, learning as fast as I could in terms of the industry knowledge, but finding ways to contribute with the background and the experience that I had built up over time. And I think that's something that's really important as you're transitioning from role to role, and industry to industries. How can you bring value short-term immediately as you're building up your industry knowledge? Because obviously it's gonna take some time. Now we can talk about that throughout the session here, Nisarg. I think that's an important piece to be successful in those transitions. I worked at TELUS Health. A couple of years down the road, Alliacare knocked on my door. They had a challenge of balancing their investment in product management versus R&D. Alliacare is a technology company doing home care. And in home care can seem simple, but it's quite subtle and can be quite complex, from onboarding clients, onboarding home care workers, matching the two together, scheduling, managing a day-to-day, doing revenue cycle management. So a lot of subtleties in that platform. And so one of my key contributions to AlayaCare was growing the team quite extensively, quite quickly. And we went from a team of 12 to 70 in 3 years. The company grew from 150 to 650 employees. So, you know, the challenges and the joys of growth definitely lived through them. And yeah, and I joined MEDFAR around 2 years ago now. Again, EHR company, so still in healthcare, different kind of environment as well, you know, catering to physicians and clinics and primary care, so different use cases, but same regulatory environment. So that's something that, you know, can vary a lot from role to role as well. So that's my journey in 5 minutes. Yeah, and it was all about really getting involved in the passion of building products. And the different industries were a function of bit of luck and desire to contribute in the Montreal area, I guess.
That is awesome, Patrick. Thank you so much for walking us through the journey. Before I go into questions, for folks, I see a few more people have joined. Folks who just joined us in the last couple of minutes, we actually started 15 minutes early today. We had moved the time for the webinar. So we were just walking through Patrick's journey from where he was, his first role, to where he's now. That was part one of our session. Part two is actually going to be a whole bunch of questions that I have for Patrick, different learning in different parts of his journey. And let's move to that part now. Patrick, I don't know if you have thought about this, but my first question, I'm going to go slightly different than what you and I discussed a few weeks ago. You mentioned Montreal a few times, and you also mentioned that your wife was working in as a physiotherapist, that you had a few options available to you. How much has your career journey been determined by where you are geographically and what things you had available to you in your region?
For me, I would say quite significantly, to be honest. Like my family is around the Montreal area. We have 3 kids, and for us, it was very important to have a network supporting us as we were growing our family. My kids are older now; they're 20, 18, and 16, so they're a little bit more dependent. But we felt it was really important to have that support system, so we could spend time together, do things we love together, but also be present for our kids. So for me, it was never a question of moving elsewhere. It was, yeah, we really wanted to stay anchored around this area, and working remotely is something that's fairly recent, right? So I think COVID brought a new dimension to working remote, but before that, it was not necessarily an option. So. Yeah, so a lot of it was driven by this desire to stay in the Montreal area and the city that I love, obviously. So yeah, and the rest is looking at opportunities and being able to also, be flexible in some of the industries. And I have to say that, having worked in different industries, there are always really interesting challenges to be solved. Like I never was bored in any of the industries that I worked in. That was, and so I think there are interesting challenges across the board. The question is, are you motivated, right, by working in the industry? I think that's the bottom line. And if you find it motivating, and that really helps you push harder, because as we know in product management, you really can't, let up. So you really have to be passionate about pushing the envelope, no matter what industry you're in.
That's very interesting, and that's a very interesting perspective. Also, a very cool constraint that you had, that you wanted to be close to family in Montreal, and you were okay like changing roles and industries, and you still found it very fulfilling. Me, on the other hand, I've only worked in one industry, and I've actually moved locations in order to be in that industry. So it tells you that there's a whole bunch of different paths to the top, and you can take your path based on what's important to you, for anyone who's looking to get into PM or is already in PM. You also mentioned industries, which is the kind of the key part of my next question. I have multiple axes, and I want to understand from your perspective how the PM role differs across these multiple axes. Industry is one axis, size is another one. Well, let's go with industry first. Um, you've done it all. You've done healthcare, cybersecurity, I was taking notes, retail, you've done defense, you've done health insurance. How has your role been different across all of these different industries?
Great question. So I think the nature of the activities stay roughly the same, right?
Hmm.
You want to learn, want to be on top of what trends are happening, the latest news, and try to stay uh, on top of and ahead of the curve to really influence your product in the right direction. Your the way your background influences, or the way your background influences your level of success may be different, or the nature of the backgrounds that have success can also differ quite a bit. So for example, in cybersecurity, if you're not keenly interested in technology and you're not invested in understanding it deeply, I think you would find it very hard to be a product manager in that industry. It probably would not work, right? And doesn't mean you have to have been a developer or anything like that, but you have to have that interest and that keen interest. Now, in healthcare, when I joined, for example, at TELUS Health in community pharmacy software, one of our product managers was a pharmacist. And that was an eye-opener for me at the time. Oh,
Wow.
so that was a first. And the reason was we absolutely needed the deep knowledge of how a pharmacy needs to operate, and the subtleties of what makes a difference were so important that we actually had a pharmacist on staff working 4 days a week, not 5, and spending the first day in community pharmacy. So she was continuing to work as a pharmacist and was a product manager
Hmm.
with us. Now, pharmacists aren't necessarily as technical, and so speaking directly with engineers as you could if you were wearing the two hats, the PM and the PO hat, wasn't so great. And so we had teamed this PM up with a very capable PO, very strong PO, which did that bridge between the two, and that recipe worked very, very well. Like, we were able to get the insights we needed, and she was extremely useful for me to learn everything about the industry very quickly. But we're also able to get the guidance, the technical side of the guidance on to the engineering team in that conversation, right? That more technical conversation going. So that was that was an eye opener for me. That and that's part of what I find interesting in product management is the diversity of the backgrounds of the product managers I work with is so great. So people come into product management, with a technical background, some with a very, I'm going to say, vertical background. So think about a pharmacist, think about a nurse. So in Allied Care, we
Yeah.
had subject matter experts, which were nurses, to help us
Wow.
sort out how we are going to, for example, set up clinical notes and charting across our different submarkets. Some of them were extremely like clinical, like we had pediatrics, infusion, etc. So and so the combination of these roles is really interesting. So if you have a background that is very specific in industry and you're not technical, there's still ways for you to get into product management. And so, but again, depending on the industry, that could be a fit, could work, or maybe less of a fit in other industries, such as cybersecurity, for example.
That's pretty cool. How do you think that impacts your role if, based on the size of the company? Like, is your role different for large versus startups? Or if your customers are, if it's a B2B company or a B2C company?
Yeah, varies quite a bit. First off, in startups, you're most likely starting a new product. Right there, that changes the dynamic completely. And
Hmm.
I've started a couple of products, and you're exploring greenfield from ground up. Maybe you're trying to solve a problem no one's solved before at MEDFAR right now. That's part of what we're doing in Quebec, is trying to bring together solutions to bring physicians and community pharmacists closer together with a more efficient prescription coordination with patients. We're able to do
Hmm.
that because we have scale, and that's what we're doing in the Quebec product. in the Quebec market, sorry. In a large scale or in a large organization, typically you're going to inherit an existing product with some mass, with some adoption already.
Right.
And that comes with a different set of considerations. And there's a lot of history behind it, which as a product manager, you have to learn, you have to know, because a lot of decisions were made probably for very good reasons. And if you're not aware of those, you may be just be doing the same mistakes over again. And managing an existing product is very different from trying to create one from scratch, where you're literally finding things very dynamically, organically, and iterating very quickly. If you have a very large established product, you're trying to go as fast as you can, most often, right? You want to innovate, you want to iterate, but you also are dealing with a set of expectations from customers. So that's really important. The other piece I would say is you talked about how the world changes in industries. If you're in an industry that has been using technology and software for a while, and you're bringing a new product, even if that new product has benefits, you're going to need to deal with an expectation of a certain set of functionalities that you need to deliver. So, for example, when TELUS Health started dreaming of creating a new pharmacy management system for community pharmacies, well, community pharmacies had already been using software for 20 years. That software was outdated, it was old, some would say it was ugly, but pharmacists were not ready to accept using a software that had, I'm going to say, 50% of the features just because it looked nice, or because the UX was better for that 50%. Because if it meant letting go of 50% of value add of the previous software, they were just not willing to do that. And so when you're doing a startup, typically, you're trying to go to the market with as nimble a product as possible to bring value and keep people coming back, right? And then you iterate and you grow on that value proposition over time. That's your mantra. That's how you want to build it up, and that's the right thing to do. If you're dealing with an industry where you're trying to replace an existing product, you have to deal with the expectations of that feature set, and that brings a whole different set of considerations and challenges as well. So your role as a product manager, is going to differ. Like, for example, you may have to choose pockets of markets to go into differently, even if you're trying to build a full-fledged product, a very large product, versus doing a startup where maybe you're doing something very specific for a broader audience, and you're capturing scale that way.
Right. Right. And COVID has changed stuff for a lot of people, and some not for, but not for everyone. Like, I've been remote for the last 10 years, just by the nature of the companies I happen to work for. But for you, who was doing a PM role more in person, how did that change? Like, what is the and looking in the future for PMs, who could be remote, who could be hybrid, could be in person. AWS is now asking everyone to go back to in person 5 days a week. How do you think that changes your approach as a PM?
Well, the bottom line is, as a PM, you need to influence. You're leading through influence, right? That's very fundamental piece, and you can only influence through meaningful connections. If you don't have meaningful connection with people, it's very difficult to influence them. It's probably impossible, actually, to influence them if you don't have a meaningful connection with them. So the question becomes, how do you create meaningful connections in all of these environments, right, as a PM? And I think companies who have a strategy around being, for example, fully remote, integrate that in their approach to enabling people to connect, and or those that are successful anyway, do that. An example, for example, TELUS Health. TELUS was one of the first in the Montreal area to go fully remote. And when I joined this organization, it was the first time I experienced it. I walked into some of the meeting rooms and I was shocked that there were no whiteboards and sometimes even no projectors in those meeting rooms. And I was just wondering why that is. As a software developer, a meeting room without a whiteboard to me was useless, pretty much.
Yeah.
But very quickly I realized, okay, even if I'm in person, there's at least 30-40% of the people that are remote, right? So if there are no whiteboards, there are no projectors, well, you're forced to create content that everyone can consume electronically. So it created the same experience for everyone around the table from that perspective. And so that's just one example how, environments change. I think by far the most challenging situation is hybrid, uh, because, again, going back to creating connections, um, if especially if part of the people are creating connections in person and others are not able to do so ever, depending on how your setup is.
Yeah.
And hybrid, 2 days a week and 3 days a week remote is one thing, but hybrid, having some people fully remote and others more fully in person, I think that creates some challenges. There are definitely strategies to do that. For example, we bring people together on a regular basis around, monthly events and so on, so that people can interact and so on. And it's also up to you to make the effort, I would say, to connect with people. But it does create environments where it can be more difficult, can be more challenging. But on your side, having worked 10 years remote, I'm sure you've got some strategies as well.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head by saying meaningful connections, right? I was just reflecting. So I work for Huntress, and Huntress is a remote first company. Every single person in the company is remote. There is no office. Um, and the only time that we come together is thrice a year when, right now, I have an offsite for all the leaders in the company. We have another offsite for all people in the company come together once. And then we also have your team offsite, so you meet together. And, we kind of, a funny anecdote. I was just in a large conference room with like 40 other people, and you're like, oh, let's do a whiteboard. And everybody immediately opened up Zoom and is like, whiteboard. And like, no, 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 not that whiteboard, an actual whiteboard. It's like we've gotten so used to it. But I think what I have seen different is the rise of documents as a tool to influence.
Mhm.
And as a PM, getting good at not just presentations, but also getting good at writing documents has become very important. As a PM, learning how to influence asynchronously has become important, and how to influence through proxy has been important. So, like, it's just not me trying to convince everyone. I build up these lieutenants who then go and convince others, who then go and convince others. And I think that's, being stuff that being working remote has changed, a lot over the last few years.
Yeah, I think your comment on the documentation as a tool to influence is absolutely right. Um, you know, that is, that is a great tool, and it serves a couple of purposes. You're influencing people directly, but then it also serves as, I would say, memory, like
Mm,
for the company, for organization, for the team, which is really important, like to be able to move forward. Okay.
yeah, I like how it's become more democratic. And in the past, it was a lot of reliance on tribal knowledge. And this has led to us writing things down and making things more accessible. And that's led to a few good business opportunities for companies like Glean, for instance, that can do really amazing enterprise search and bring data together to answer questions that you might have in an enterprise. So it's been pretty cool. I like the change personally. I don't think I can ever go back to a hybrid or and in person. But changing tack a little bit here, let's assume that I'm not a PM. I'm just working in a tech company, and I'm early in my career, and I'm trying to decide what's the right path for me, right? Do I should I become PM? Should I become a engineering manager? Should I go into program management or project management? And I'm not really sure. I haven't done these roles, but I know I have a few skills that I want to take into these roles. So, um, what are the different skills needed for these different roles? So I can help more junior folks decide which path to pursue.
I think before you even think about your skills, I think which questions really drive you is really important.
Mm,
Like if
yeah.
what drives you in the what and the why, then most likely PM product management is probably a great
Mm,
path. If you're obsessed about how things are built, like physically built, then engineering manager on the engineering side may be the best path. If you are obsessed about, call it real life operating systems, how things are structured to deliver, like to work, then program management may be the right choice. So I think that's the first thing. I think everyone needs to be detail oriented to some level. Like, you have to care about details. You have to have rigor. That's a given in all three roles for sure. I think product management, you have to have interest in reading the macro elements, like high level trends and so on, which is a skill not everyone has necessarily. You can be very detail oriented and, but not necessarily enjoy reading and staying abreast of those macro trends and trying to project yourself in those macro trends. So I think your ability to your level of comfort in ambiguity is an element that is critical to consider as you're considering those three tracks, right? And I would say ambiguity in program, there's a lot of ambiguity in program management, but there's probably more in product management, and you have to make a decision based on ambiguous data or incomplete data. And I would say the higher you go up the ranks, the more risk there is with every decision you're making with that incomplete data. And program managers are actually trying to evaluate risk and take risk out of the equation. We all do, but I think the nature of it is a little different. Like in product management, if you're not comfortable with risk, it's going to be a tough day at the office every single day because
Yeah, that's a great thing. You mentioned two things that I really love there. You mentioned risk taking, the appetite for it, and also the reduction. You also mentioned the word obsession, and no matter what role you're in, the obsession with your craft is important. If it's customer, it's the why, is it the what, is it the how? I think that obsession is one of the core things that really makes a difference as you want to rise up. So that is pretty cool. You worked with, you worked in startups. You said you worked with founders. You also were, you told us that you failed, so which is pretty cool. So tell us about your experience and learnings on working with founders.
Most founders are the very first product manager in their companies. Most founders have the vision. And so working with founders as a product manager, first of all, you really have to, the culture fit has to be very good. And not that you have to think alike, but you have to be comfortable with the culture of the founder. That's really important. And also realize what this person is willing, and when I say to give up, to let go of, and what they really want to hold on to, and for good reasons most of the times. So, and as a product manager, you need to understand that, respect it, and work through it. So, or if not, simply maybe that's not the environment for you, or that's not the right fit, right? You're not the right team member or teammate for that founder. And for example, I met with one company that was on the bulk of scaling up. And I remember in the interviewing for product management position, and this person, the owner, telling me, what he had in mind for the roles and responsibilities. And I realized, wait, I'm not quite the same definition of product management as I had. And I asked him a very fundamental question. I said, okay, so between you and me, who is talking to customers, trying to figure out what we're doing next? And he says, I will. Okay. And you will prioritize whatever I decide is important.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, it could work, but that you have to understand those boundaries, and you have to be comfortable with them, because at the end of the day, the founders, obviously you want to influence, you want to bring evolution to how a company is managed, especially when companies are scaling up, right? Roles get a little bit more specialized, especially at the CEO level, for example. But still, understanding what their expectation is really, really important. because that will drive the dynamics quite extensively. And I often compare, if you think of large organizations versus startups, if you have a great idea in a large organization, it may be a lot of work to get it through, but more often than not, you're going to find support of enough people to kind of convince, the group above to get on board with your idea. In a startup, for better or worse, you need to convince one person. So if you're not aligned with what really matters, convincing this person is extremely difficult. It's not impossible. So I think, what matters, so call it values, call it culture, understanding what the founder is willing to or wants to manage and is willing to let go of over time as well, right? Sometimes it's a question of where are we in the evolution of the company, but understanding that is really key, not only for you to be happy in your role, but to contribute in the right way, right, to the success of the company.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think for folks who are watching, I think the thing that if I were to extract from what you said was you have to really, during the interview process, try to figure out what is going to be your role. And yes, you're a PM, but every PM role is different. That's the premise of this talk, or of this chat. What's the problem that the founders need to solve? And it's going to be atypical. It's going to be different. It might be what you said. I'll tell you what to do and you prioritize. Or sometimes it's the other way around, where you have to help them grow and you have to help them scale. You have to help them and fill in the gaps where they might not be as strong. I think it's always good intentions, but trying to learn that during the process before you go in will really help you succeed in long term, because you want to make sure that you learn early whether it's the right fit for you or not.
And especially in startup mode, things evolve so fast, right? 6 months for a startup is, equivalent of maybe 2 years in larger organizations in terms of, how things have to move. And so understanding that out of the gate is super, super important.
That's awesome. I know we're getting close to our time here. We have 5 more minutes. I have only a couple more questions for you. The first one is, you are here in your journey right now. You've, grown from a director, senior director, VP, you're managing teams now. What is your approach to, growing teams, from hiring to skilling them up, to ensuring the right processes there, making sure that a culture stays, constant or not? What is Patrick's approach to growing and hiring?
Right. So growing and hiring, they're obviously they're tied, but there are also different things. So when I'm hiring, something that's really important to me is the team fit. How does the team come together? How do they complement each other? And not that they need to get along and think the same thing all the time. Actually, it's quite the opposite. You want people that are able to have good conversations, respectfully challenge each other, and come out stronger on the other side. And once that respect is gone, then you have real issue. Like I've walked into situations where I was inheriting a team and there was a complete lack of trust, to the point where some people were convinced others were, going to purposely do bad things. Once you get there, it's very difficult to come back. So in terms of hiring, making sure that, and sometimes it can be hard in an interview process. You spend 2 or 3 hours with people, but trying to get to the values of how people interact, how they handle themselves in difficult conversations is part of it. And then the skills, right? There's no PM that is, well, every PM has strengths and has some areas where, not necessarily you're weak, but you're not as strong, right? If you think of the different spheres of influence of the PM, right? The relationship with engineering, how you push marketing, how you manage customer success, customer support, finance. So I really like to make sure that the different product managers on the team can complement each other that way. And that creates a team that is stronger as a whole. And when you're having these conversations, you're bringing up, all these difficult or important questions as a group. Growing, I really believe in empowering people. So It's really about giving the right challenges depending on where that person is in their journey. And if you think of the evolution as a product manager, it's not like you're doing new things. If you're more of a junior PM versus a senior PM, for example, you're probably doing a lot of the same things. You are managing backlogs, you are prioritizing, you are interfacing with all the stakeholders. The circle of your influence, or this, maybe a little smaller, but you're still doing the same thing. So for me, the approach is really making sure that I am putting the right project, the right level of challenge to that person, so that they are feeling that level of risk, they are feeling that little bit of discomfort in that challenge, but also not setting them up for failure, knowing that if something starts going wrong, well, we can see it coming and act on it, because you making mistakes is fine. Making mistakes that jeopardize the product or the company, then I think as a manager, that's how you failed as a manager, because you didn't see that come, or didn't protect that outcome from happening. From a tactical standpoint, you obviously want to be communicating with your team. I have one-on-ones with my team every week, with every person on my team every week. When I had a broader team, I was doing skip levels systematically with everyone on my team. Not because I wanted to know what was going on, but it was a question of creating that connection with the team and getting to know them. Again, backgrounds and people are so different, so there's so much diversity, that if you want to create that right set of challenges for the person, you have to know them a little bit, right? You can't be all
Absolutely.
yeah.
It comes back to the personal connection that you mentioned at the start. Cool. I have one more question for you, final one here. For the more junior PMs who are listening, who are trying to grow in their career, you've definitely done that through various different levels. What matters most? How can I grow in my career? How can I climb the PM career ladder? And what are the things that you've learned along the way?
Another way to like, what makes a great PM, I think, at the start, right? A lot of people will go to storytelling. You have to be a great storyteller. I think that skill is important, but you have to be a good listener. You have to be able to listen with intent. You have to go beyond what strictly is being said and understand what is meant, and have this passion to dig into understanding what is meant. And it can take different forms. Sometimes it's having a one-on-one conversation with a customer. Sometimes it's using behavioral analytics to dig into and understand what exactly is happening. And that's almost part of listening to your customer base, in terms of understanding what they're telling you through the usage that they're making of your product. And if you're starting as a PM, investing in that skill as a start, I think is a great stepping stone, or a great first step, because that will enable everything else afterwards, right? If you are understanding exactly what's happening, then you can make good decisions, you can take risks, and that even if things go wrong, well, you did so with the proper backup. If you want to be a great storyteller, hey, you need to understand what the story is all about. Otherwise, it's just not going to sound right. It's not going to sound real. And so for me, that's where it starts. I would say that over the years, that definition of listening has evolved and is continuing to evolve. In the async world, with the different tools, the different industries that you're in, how you listen differs, varies, and evolves. But reinvesting in that skill is really, really fundamental as a PM. And customers will tell you, right? Because how often do you see products fail because the customers felt like they were not being listened to anymore, and the product or the company lost their ways. So investing in that, if I had to pick one, I guess by now you've caught how I think about this, but this is the one thing that and when I'm doing interviews, that's where I start. But for example, if I'm interviewing you for a product role and you're not listening to me, well, pretty much the end. Because how are you possibly going to be listening to our customers? That just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's a great one. Wow. Listening with intent, right? It's not just listening, it's not just hearing, it's not just comprehending, it's listening with intent. And I think that is a great great skill to practice. And I agree, it stands you well for the entirety of your career. Like listening with intent is super important. That's awesome. Patrick, thank you so much for that specific bit, but also thank you so much for all of these questions over the last 45 minutes. Thank you so much for answering those patiently. I think that was a very, very awesome thing. I learned a bunch of things there, both on hiring and listening, which are two things that really matter to me. So thank you for being a guest on this webinar. For everyone who attended live, or if you watch this in the future, hopefully you got something from that, across different roles that you were at. So really appreciate that. Overall, thank you everyone for attending, and we will catch you next month on the next BDC webinar, which is going to be awesome as well. Thank you, folks. Cheers.
Thank you very much.